The field is set for the race to become your next U.S. Senator, and the last candidate to join the field is shaking up the campaign.
What mattered most to me was, number one, that I wasn't far off, which my polling said that.
This week, we dig deeper into the race for Senate and what Texas voters say they want from the candidates.
Because I know it's you, the taxpayers of Texas, that are demanding this reform.
Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick are each touting plans to cut property taxes in Texas. But there's a key question.
Where will the money come to fund any kind of government except sales tax?
The competing visions to lower your taxes and why it could create a conflict between the state's top leaders. Politics without the fight. A Texas group is trying to make that a reality.
The demonizing of the others, the us versus them, there's real fatigue around that.
The new approach happening now to bring people together for real solutions.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. The filing deadline brought a big shakeup in the race for U.S. Senate seat in Texas. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett officially launched her campaign. The announcement from the high-profile politician is reshaping the race for both Democrats and Republicans. Capitol correspondent Dylan McKim takes a closer look.
The poll from Texas Southern University shows Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has an 8-point lead over State Rep. James Tallarico. A big reason for her lead is overwhelming support from black voters. The poll shows 9 out of 10 black voters support her. Tallarico has been able to stay within striking distance by getting large support from white and Latino men. The silver lining for Tallarico, though, 1 in every 5 Democratic primary voter does not know who he is, which means he has room to grow. A spokesman for his campaign said, quote, "Polling consistently shows that the more people get to know James, the more they support him. We asked him this week how he's trying to grow his brand."
We've been to big cities and small towns. We've been to red areas and blue areas alike, and we're meeting people one-on-one. We're hearing about their hopes and their dreams and their fears.
But a challenge for Tallarico is that a huge portion of voters who don't know him are black voters, a group that strongly supports Crockett. The poll also showed voters believe she can mobilize infrequent Democrat voters to go to the poll, but they think Tallarico can get Republican crossover votes. On Friday, Crockett said in a statement, quote, "I'm in the best position to mobilize voters who've been overlooked, ignored, and excluded." She also noted in her campaign launch that Republican voters have asked her to run for Senate.
Because people are looking for real people. They are tired of these politicians that are being told what to say, when to say, and how to say it. They want somebody that they believe is real and is going to fight for them.
However, Mark Jones, a co-author of the poll, said those two strategies are in some ways mutually exclusive.
The more that you focus in on the base and try to mobilize these low propensity voters to turn out, the more you may alienate moderate Republicans and independents who you might want to cross over.
Jones also added both Democrat candidates will likely have a tough general election matchup.
Simply because Texas remains a relatively Republican state where the GOP nominee starts off every election with about an 8 to 10 point advantage.
But Jones did say anything can happen in a year to change the general election. One thing is clear, though. The Democratic primary will be a tight race all the way up to March. Dylan McKim, State of Texas.
We want to dig a little deeper into the Senate race. Joining us now is Jim Henson, the director of the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas. Welcome.
Great to be here, Josh.
Well, I know that you've been busy with all of this and you've conducted polling on both James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett. What do we know about what voters think about these two candidates?
Well, you know, if we're talking about Democratic voters in the primary, we know that both are viewed very favorably by, people that are likely to vote in Democratic primaries. Jasmine Crockett's rise has been somewhat meteoric in a lot of ways, and so I think when we started polling on her position or favorability ratings in the fall, surprised to see just how well known she is for somebody who's never run statewide. James Tallarico still has to reach out and establish himself with more Democratic voters. I don't think he's going to have too hard a time doing that. With Jasmine Crockett, I think it's a matter of, holding the fort in a way and not making mistakes in a way that I think some observers are anticipating. She's a very hot personality. They've each got strengths and weaknesses in the Democratic base they have to work on. Jasmine Crockett running very strongly among progressives, but particularly among black voters, and with Colin Allred out of the race now, she's inherited, I think, a default black vote in this. James Tallarico running much stronger among men than among women, although he's doing okay with that. So they each have to kind of look at the other and try to eat a little bit into the other's coalition.
So that's the Democrats. We
Yep.
also have a Republican Senate primary that's very crowded with three major candidates. That's incumbent John Cornyn, Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Congressman Wesley Hunt. Where do those three men stand now with Republican voters?
Well, with Republican voters, Paxton is still the preferred candidate compared to the other two. In our polling, when we compared their favorability ratings in the fall, Paxton viewed favorably by about 10% more of Republicans than Cornyn is, which is kind of remarkable given how long Cornyn has been around. Wesley Hunt complicates this in terms of the possibility that he sends this race into a runoff. But I think we're still looking at Ken Paxton enjoying an advantage among a very, very conservative Republican electorate that also, I think, appreciates Paxton's style, more aggressive, a little hotter, a little more MAGA aligned than they do Cornyn, who again has long been judged by a lot of the most conservative activists in the Republican Party in the last decade as insufficiently conservative. That's not reflected really in his voting record, but nonetheless it's the rap on him.
So the economy and affordability are two issues that are seeming to dominate a lot of these political conversations. How does that look for Texas voters? Are those the top concerns as well?
Absolutely. Particularly among independents and Democrats, but also among an increasing share of Republicans. When, for example, in the fall, in both our August and our October polls, when we asked Texans about their economic concerns, consistently the top three concerns by a large margin are, basically the price of everyday goods, the price of housing, the price of healthcare. Healthcare obviously being very activated right now as a political issue. I think that's really the issue to watch as we go into 2026. I think we're not going to hear a ton about these issues in these primary elections, which are going to be much more inwardly focused in each party. But once we get through the primaries, unless something really monumental changes in the economy in a positive direction, the economy is just going to dominate the discussion in 2026. And all of the campaigns are going to have to find an effective way to speak to that.
Be here before you know it.
Very close.
Jim Henson, Texas Politics Project, thank you for being with us.
Great to be with you, Josh, as always.
Politics often feels like a battlefield, but what if it didn't have to?
We realized that us versus them really meant that you weren't going to get to any sort of meaningful solutions.
A new movement says it's time to build, not fight. Find out how they're bringing that mission to Texas. Two powerful proposals aim to reshape your tax bill, but the governor and lieutenant governor take different paths to reach that goal. We look closer at the conflict over plans to help Texans save money. Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick are each touting plans to cut property taxes in Texas, but they're taking distinctly different approaches to help lower your tax bill. Capitol reporter Adam Schwager looks at how these plans could help homeowners and why the lieutenant governor has concerns about one key part of the governor's plan.
I'm really excited about today.
On Tuesday, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick revealed a new plan to reduce the tax burden for Texas homeowners.
We're going to take the senior homestead exemption, where your taxes are frozen and your values are frozen, down to 55.
He calls his proposal Operation Double Nickel. In conjunction with an extra $40,000 homestead exemption for all homeowners, Patrick thinks this is the most responsible way forward to fund schools while reducing property taxes.
From 65 to 55 will cost our budget about $1.3 billion. That is very doable.
Patrick said the state's growth is fueling higher tax revenue, which he said should go back to Texans in the form of tax cuts.
The Texas budget surplus exceeds $11 billion a year.
Governor Greg Abbott has also been saying that on the campaign trail.
When we get that budget surplus, the first thing we should do with it, and the only thing we should do with it, is return it to you, the people.
He spoke Wednesday in Weslaco, touting his 5-point plan to cut property taxes.
We can and we must completely abolish the school district property tax for homeowners and homestead owners.
Abbott's plan to eliminate school property taxes drew questions from Patrick.
Where will the money come to fund any kind of government except sales tax?
He noted how much sales tax would have to increase to fully fund schools while eliminating school district homestead property taxes.
You'd have to go from 8.25 cents to 14 or 15 cents. You'd have to double the sales tax.
While they differ on the details, both leaders say they're ready to work together to give Texans tax relief.
I applaud the governor for trying to get property taxes down low. We can agree or disagree on some things.
Because I know it's you, the taxpayers of Texas, that are demanding this reform.
For State of Texas, I'm Adam Schwager.
These proposals come after Texas voters approved a constitutional amendment to provide an additional $60,000 homestead exemption to homeowners over age 65. Dallas area State Senator Nathan Johnson was the lone vote against the additional senior exemption. We asked him why.
They are structuring into the future in the face of very uncertain economic winds. Big property tax relief to people who already are pretty well off.
The Senior Homestead Exemption Amendment passed with support from more than 77% of Texas voters. Moving beyond partisan warfare, a new approach to policymaking is taking root in Texas.
Just giving citizens a voice in policymaking, identifying what is it that they care about, and how do they think that we should solve these problems.
We look at a new movement taking shape in the state, find out how they're bringing people together for real solutions. New insight into what happened in Kerr County on July 4th as the river rose in the middle of the night. How just released 911 calls are helping explain the overwhelming emergency first responders were up against. When we talk about politics, we often use words of war, speaking of battles or fights to get things done. And now a group called the Builders Movement is taking a different approach. The goal is to bring people from different backgrounds and political beliefs together. It's now bringing that mission here to Texas with what its leaders call Citizen Solutions Sessions. Will DuPree spoke with the executive director of Builders to learn more about their approach to build real policy solutions.
Here to tell us more about that work is Stacey Blakely. She is the executive director of the Builders Movement. Stacey, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Well, we're grateful to be here.
Okay, let's start with, what is it about our current political climate that makes you think this mission will work now?
I think we're seeing the tides turning. There's always a pendulum in politics. We see it. You go far left, far right. I think what you have now is a majority of Americans, and there's plenty of studies to back this up, they're exhausted by all of it. They're tired of the chaos, they want solutions, and the demonizing of the others, the us versus them, there's real fatigue around that. And you can see it in polling, you can see it in the fact that universities all over the country are suddenly introducing programs so that there is civic dialogue, that students have to actually talk to one another even if they have differences. And so I'd say Builders was slightly ahead of the curve because we realized that us versus them really meant that you weren't going to get to any sort of meaningful solutions. But I think you can sense there is a reluctance amongst the population to just accept that battle cry that you have heard from hyper-partisan theater, which is a lot of it.
That is the status quo that we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
So how does success look for Builders now that it is coming here to Texas?
Well, it's a process for us here. Like anything, when you're engaging in change, there are several steps that we're going to take. And so the first is a Citizen Solutions that you mentioned. That's a really important process that we can talk about a little bit more in depth. But just giving citizens a voice in policy making, identifying what is it that they care about, and how do they think that we should solve these problems. Builders is not a think tank. We're not going to prescribe these are the solutions that you need to follow. Instead, we really want this to be a grassroots, bottoms-up approach. So in addition to the Citizen Solutions, we also have a digital AI conversation tool so that Texans all over the country can give input. So success at the end is we have citizens from all over the great state standing at Governor Abbott's desk, let's say May or June of 27, and we're signing into law legislation that they came up and advocated for.
So you mentioned those citizen solutions sessions. You had some just this past weekend. So what did you hear from Texans exactly at that time?
What I thought was really encouraging is that we had a really wide variety of people in the room. We had a 19-year-old self-described liberal. We had a 71-year-old East Texas Republican. And, you know, we had folks from Alpine to Austin and Lufkin to Lubbock, and many came in quite skeptical. And they thought, one of the women there said, I didn't think that I could actually have a constructive conversation with someone on the other side. And so as they got to know each other and build trust, which is part of the exercise, what they started to share were their own healthcare stories, because that's an issue that touches everyone's lives. That's why we're focusing on it. And then what you saw is a mix of pragmatic ideas, hopeful ideas. We had practitioners in the room, insurance folks. We had just all your kinds of citizens that are going to be sharing their different experiences, but all of that combined was sort of democracy in action right there in front of us, you know, at a conference table here in Austin.
Well, good luck with this next step.
Thank you.
Stacey Blakely with the Builders Movement. Thanks again for talking to us.
It's my pleasure.
You can see more of our interview online now. Plus, we have links to information about builders and their push for bipartisan policy solutions. You can find it now on our website in this week's State of Texas story. Critical moments captured in hundreds of 911 calls now released to our team. How they're giving us a look into the 4th of July floods as they were happening. For months, our team has been pushing to get audio from emergency calls made during the catastrophic July 4th flooding in the Hill Country. Last week, officials released recordings of hundreds of 911 calls. The calls detail frantic, heartbreaking moments, people desperate for help, and dispatchers pleading with callers to get to higher ground as emergency crews stretched thin and tried to help hundreds across the county in a short amount of time. We're going to play some of those calls for you, and a warning, they may be distressing to some viewers. We're sharing them to provide insight into the intensity of the disaster and the urgent work to save lives. A small dispatch team in Kerrville fielded those calls for help, and among them, panicked calls from summer camps along the Guadalupe River where hundreds of young children were visiting. Investigator Kelly Wiley reports it included desperate questions from Camp Mystic, where 27 young campers and counselors and the camp owner died.
At 4 in the morning, as the Guadalupe River rose past 20 feet, one caller from Camp Mystic told dispatchers she could not get in touch with the main office, highlighting issues with communication.
We are currently kind of stranded on the hill past the camp. We are disconnected from the main camp by a bridge, and we can't get in contact with our main office. We are all getting out of all the cabins, but some of the cabins are filling up with water.
Minutes down the road, as the river was reaching its highest levels, Camp La Junta was also desperately trying to get help for the hundreds of young campers staying there.
We are totally flooded. We've got cabins that are starting to fill up. What do we do?
Dispatchers telling the caller to get children and staff to higher ground as rescue teams tried to get to them.
Just when you get there, go ahead and start doing a head count. Make sure you have everybody. We do have a strike team going that way with boats. It's just going to take them a minute because it's all of Highway 39.
The calls only getting more desperate as campers waited for help.
We need, like, now. Do we have an ETA?
I do not have an ETA. Unfortunately, the entire city is affected.
That was Kelly Wiley reporting. Our team poured through hundreds of calls. Among the frantic moments captured in the recordings, there were stories of rescues and resilience. Our Kevin Bosker spoke with one of the people who made a call that saved his friend's life.
Early morning on July 4th, floods ravaged through Kerr County, leaving Scott Weldon and his wife holding on for dear life to a tree, doing their best not to get swept away.
The water was about right here.
Weldon called 911 himself, but was unsure what his location was.
That's why I called up my friend Timothy. I was like, Timothy, I've called 911. Can you call 911 and tell them where we are? We're on the corner. I don't know what the name of the street is.
Timothy Gloria was at work that early morning, and he wasted no time to dial 911.
Kerr County 911, what's the location of your emergency?
Waterfront and Box Elder. At the corner there, there's a couple, they're holding on to a bush and just trying to hang in there and not get drifted away.
We played this call in front of Gloria and Weldon.
Mr. Gloria, we're going to get help get it headed over there, okay, to Waterfront and Box Elder. What's your, oh yeah, Box Elder. Okay, we have them en route.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
Terrible memory.
Yeah.
He cried all the way home over here, trying to come get you. I jumped in the car and left work. I didn't care, I didn't clock out or anything.
By the time Gloria came to where Scott and his wife were trapped, they were saved by first responders.
Do you feel that his 911 call is the reason why you and your wife are alive today?
Yeah, Timothy's call got the cops to come, literally right there. So, and you never know, you know, if the bush snaps like 2 minutes later, suddenly we're floating down the river again. So, yeah, you may have saved my life. You never know. Yeah.
You owe me $10,000.
Yeah, man.
That was Kevin Bosker reporting. There is much more to our team's reporting on the emergency calls. Online now, you can find our full coverage as well as links to more audio from the calls. Just look for the links in this week's State of Texas story. Thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.